I remember this very vivid example of a Filipino lady coming to me. And, we were having a chat, and she goes and looks at my skin complexion and goes like, "Oh my God, you have such a great skin tone. You're so beautiful." And for a minute, I felt like, no, you're not talking to me. You're talking to somebody else. Like, let me look around. Like, who are you talking to? Because this is something that I've never heard growing up. Why? Because I think the stigmas that Shweta and I talk about in the podcast is a lot to do with the stereotypical ways of observing beauty. In India, still we have fair skin, is more relatable to more beautiful people and stuff. And also growing up to conservative, you can't wear this lens skirt, or what are you, are you trying to attract boys? That's looking at you. That's why rape is so common, because the women are just flaunting around now. So all this stuff is so ingrained. And I almost to the point that, oh yeah, I think you're right. I shouldn't be doing this because I'm attracting boys. I shouldn't be like, I'm not that good looking because I am dark. So all this BS that was collected over time in these 20 years is completely gone.
Hello, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the NRI Woman. We're stoked to have two phenomenal guests joining us today, Shweta Ravi Shankar and Rema Chari, the dynamic duo behind the very popular Chai Break podcast. Like so many of us living abroad, Shweta and Rema recognize the unique challenges and opportunities that come with navigating multiple cultures. They aren't afraid to call out the BS and challenge every outdated notion about how women, especially those from our cultures, are supposed to exist in this world. We're going to be chatting about how they're constantly pushing boundaries behind societal expectations and their mental health journeys. So as immigrants, which I'm also an immigrant, as immigrants navigating like multiple cultures, what has been like your biggest challenges and being able to stay true to yourselves?
I can try going on this one first because it has so many layers to this question. So been here for more than 20 years, and what are the challenges navigating the landscape being South Asian women coming from there? I think that has been the biggest transformation for me. So when let me give you an example. 22 years ago when I moved, I still remember, it was a clear January winter day, 2002. And it was my first snowfall I've ever seen. The first time I ever took a flight out was when I was 28 years old. And I grew up in a culture, in a very typical South Indian Brahmin culture. Talks were always going on when my dad was around, saying that I should be married when I was 18. But sadly he passed away. And, I went on to doing medical school. So life was, when I moved here, and I grew up as probably the darkest cousin among a sea of fair Brahmin cousins. And so I was always called the dark one. So I grew up with a lot of that stigma, very conservative stigma. Can I wear this? Can I even wear, the outfits that I'm wearing today? So I remember my first pair of jeans were when I came here to the US. Until then, I was completely covered, right? Because that's how I was raised. And I came here. It's the second day I moved here. I remember this very vivid example of a Filipino lady coming to me. And, we were having a chat, and she goes and looks at my skin complexion and goes like, "Oh my God, you have such a great skin tone. You're so beautiful." And for a minute, I felt like, no, you're not talking to me. You're talking to somebody else. Like, let me look around. Like, who are you talking to? Because this is something that I've never heard growing up. Why? Because I think the stigmas that Shweta and I talk about in the podcast is a lot to do with the stereotypical ways of observing beauty. In India, still we have fair skin, is more relatable to more beautiful people and stuff. And also growing up to conservative, you can't wear this lens skirt, or what are you, are you trying to attract boys? That's looking at you. That's why rape is so common, because the women are just flaunting around now. So all this stuff is so ingrained. And I almost to the point that, oh yeah, I think you're right. I shouldn't be doing this because I'm attracting boys. I shouldn't be like, I'm not that good looking because I am dark. So all this BS that was collected over time in these 20 years is completely gone. And it's so liberating and transforming. So the challenge basically is removing this kind of stereotypical cultural ways that has been put into us. So There's so much more we can get into it, but I want to let Shweta give her spiel as well.
I think for me, the biggest transformation was, today I'm outspoken, I can challenge the norms, I can talk about various different things. Funnily enough, when I moved, I did not know, Rama, that it was January of 2002, because I moved January of 2012. I landed, it was the first snowfall in New York City. And I think it was a combination of feeling lonely because suddenly I was in a city where the only person I knew was, my husband. I didn't know anyone. But there was also this sense of finally feeling free. I actually grew up in a pretty liberal household, I have to say. But even then, from your sabzi wala to your, neighborhood little store, mom and pop store, everybody is kind of, I grew up knowing that everybody is in your business. And that always made me so uncomfortable. Like your neighbor auntie is like, oh, when is she getting married? Oh, what is she doing? Da, 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 da. And finally to be anonymous, I think that was to me like just so fantastic. But on the flip side, all of a sudden I had all this freedom. I was in a city where I could be anonymous. I had all the freedom, but then I didn't know what to do with it. That was, it was kind of the irony of the whole situation, because now I'm like, okay, I've always had these thoughts, but they're, or these opinions, but I've always suppressed them. And now when I have, the space to talk to various different people in New York City, um, being the melting pot, but then I don't know if my opinions and are valid. Are they right? And also the culture you grow up in, teaches you there is only right and wrong. It's life and experience and wisdom that you learn that it's just not two buckets. Everything is just not black and white, right and wrong. um and it's okay to have these different perspectives. And I think that has been like the biggest learning curve, because going through that period of, there was a huge period of self-doubt. And I think that's the kind of life I lived even in India, whether it was education, career, I'm a dancer, whether it was my dance life, all of that was steeped in self-doubt. And that kind of continued even here. So it was a truly a journey of like, I think for both of us, those initial years was finding ourselves and, finding ourselves, believing in ourselves, and actually unlearning. I think the entire journey has just been to, um, be my authentic self. How can I be my authentic self? And how can I be confident in who I am and not worry about, what other people will think? I think that is the biggest burden that we carry within the South Asian culture, and especially for us women, because we're constantly taught to think about what everybody else will think, from your career choice to who you marry to what you wear, everything.
I don't. One of the big things I think when Shweta was saying it's just the light bulbs are going on, is the big revelation happened when I became a mother, right? Yes, I was here for 10 years before that. I had my, I was getting into a career physician track. Then when I became a mother is when everything just was called into question. And I'm sure this happens to many women. And thankfully, I was able to address those questions very well because I was in the US and not because I was in a place where I'm surrounded by people who are telling me this is exactly how we should do. Here, I could. There were so many questions. It's probably a crisis mode, trying to understand, oh my God, now I have a husband. I have a residency here. I'm doing my residency fellowship. I'm going to have a career and I have a daughter. Who am I? It was literally that for who am I? I started questioning, like, and then that's when all the pieces that have been served. Oh, you are a mother, so your first job is to take care of Ananya. You are a wife. Your first job is to, in between. You are, you have to support the family. You have to bring in the bride. You have to earn the income, so two people can potentially have a good life. So you have to do that. But no one really has raised me ever to consider who are you? What is it that Rama wants?
Yeah, yeah.
And after Ananya was born, and thankfully because I was in the US and I hear constantly conversations around that I was able to really spend the next several years of just discovering, which is when Shweta met me. That is when actually the transformation, I should say, really happened, not really in the 10 years before that, is when I really started questioning, who am I? And then the being here gave me opportunities to answer those questions. That journey is still continuing now. Every single day, I'm just peeling a layer that I am not and adding a layer that I am.
It resonates, I think, both with Nino and myself as well, because and it's exactly like you said, right, Shweta? You come from, when we come from India and you move out, you are taught to be a certain way. So, I mean, there is, there is, and also there is a stereotypical view of viewing Indian women, how people outside view us, because there is that expectation that, they're going to be successful and well behaved. But really, that is just a overly simplified way of putting it across, because there are just so many layers under that. And when you start peeling off, you realize that, okay, maybe, we really aren't that well behaved, and we don't necessarily have to be. We can push those boundaries. And even if we do push those boundaries, it does not mean that, we don't fit into the good girl or the good woman label. We're so obsessed with all those kinds of labels that we truly forget who we are. So the two of you, what are you doing, consciously to sort of break away from, in your personal lives or through your work, from those kind of expectations that are set on you?
One of the bigger things that I have done is getting it, spirituality probably was a calling. Right after Nanya was born, kind of started going into the ways of yogic ways of really looking at life. Meditation became a part of what I did. Empowerment became a common language that I used to speak about anything and everything. And luckily, I have two boys and a girl, and having a girl gave me the way to look at something that I should, that could empower her in the future, something that I did not grow up. So everything that I did, I had to stop right there. All the ways of learning or living had to stop right there. What I was transmitting for her had to be completely a whole new series of lessons that I was learning along with her. The minute, every time I had to do something to empower her, I was empowering this little girl within myself. And so together, we are still learning our journey. People talk about generational trauma, and I know we're going to talk about mental health journey at some point, but generational trauma is nothing but, what we've been raised and we've been taught and what we pass it on to our offsprings. If one is not conscious about that, generational trauma is also saying the same good girl syndrome. Oh, you're such a good girl. That is generational trauma. We've been told and we're passing it along. So one of the aspects that I've done is intentionally stopping everything that I know and really combing through that and picking out the stuff that I feel is empowering and is going to make an impact, and removing all the BS.
I think my journey is kind of similar, in the sense I'm not worried about what anyone will think. We talk about it so much on the podcast, but just truly believing that everyone has a path which is unique to them. And I think the biggest way that I live this reality every single day is not falling into the societal constructs of like where, your education, your career, your house, your kids, like all of these, like the white picket fence kind of, life. Like it does not have to be that way. You do not have, there is no one way of defining success or happiness. What works for you, what works for your family. And that is the beauty of, what we have, that you could have lived, 39 years of your life a certain way, and tomorrow you can change it all. Realizing that and harnessing that power, and not getting caught up, in the rat race of what everybody else is doing. That's how I consciously practice that. And that's exactly what I, try to talk to my daughter as well. And I think that is very empowering.
So what made you both dedicate like an entire season to mental health issues? Like, was there a gap that you saw that needed to be addressed? Like, what made you all get on this journey?
Yeah, so we have our conversations outside the podcast realm, and we realize that there is this, even to say that I need help is a struggle in the South Asian community. Day-to-day work has its own issues that provides mental health struggles, right? raising a child and having a partner who can think different one day can provide the mental health struggles, in addition to how we have the patterns and behaviors that Shweta was talking about. So during our conversations offline, we realized that we are actually, we didn't know these were within the realm of trauma and mental health. But then as we were starting to look into what are the other areas with our South Asians are, having issues with, this came up. And then Shweta and I recognized saying, oh, wait, actually, we are also part of that same umbrella spectrum where we have our patterns and behaviors and struggles that we say that is just a struggle, is part of a mental health issue. So mental health can be something from just a simple issue at the time causing an inner conflict on happening, on what and how you deal with it, to a big psychiatric issue. It doesn't all have to be a huge psychiatric issue. So, but in the South Asian space, we consider mental health as the end all. Like, oh, this is something so wrong. Oh, don't say mental to me. I never raised you that way. I raised you to be really, it becomes so negative. So that's one area we felt. And we also started in that process, we understood that we are having our own issues and struggles, and maybe this is mental health struggles that we're just hiding it under the rug and calling it something else. And so both of us got ourselves therapy sessions, and that kind of helped us, and reading books on that. So that's how the mental health journey came.
Mhm. And I think also, the journey of like someone actually realizing that they have an issue that they want to address. Just because, after all, who is a therapist, right? Someone neutral, third party person who can actually just hear you out and in a totally non judgmental atmosphere. Where you can just express negative feelings, positive feelings, everything, right? And for me, actually, I vividly remember this was in I think the fall of 2021. I actually had like a near mental breakdown and it was a huge, I was just crying, and my husband did not know what to do, how to deal with it. And I somehow, I spoke to another friend who was in therapy at the time, and I got through that period. But what that one incident made me realize was that here are the patterns, here's all the generational trauma, and this is why it is happening. There's so many factors that come into someone from awareness to actually starting therapy, and I think that is not talked about enough. And I think that's why we wanted to do this entire season as a collective experience of what we are going through, and, hearing from experts like, therapists and psychologists and other women, who are dealing with very raw and real stories of their own mental health struggles. It's while it stemmed from our own personal experiences, I think it very quickly became, it resonated with everyone in the community, and it became a shared experience.
The point of where you start, where you're aware that, okay, maybe there is a problem, to actually seeking help, because there are so many things in between. Do I really need it? Is it just going to pass? Do I have the money to pay for it? It's an expensive thing. Maybe I'm not such an extreme case, but those are answers that we can never get within. And if in some way we can push them to take that first step, whether it is to have a conversation with somebody they know, to seek out a therapist, or create some awareness that maybe this is what it is. It's not just in my head, meaning bigger that's going on. I think we probably have created some difference. How has this, your journeys with your podcast and your own personal things impacted your self-care regimen and your own perspective and how you deal with things?
The one thing is that every single time we've spoken to someone, their journey, their experience, their resilience to actually come out of it, come out of the other end, has always left us so inspired. Me and Rama say this every single time. We usually record our episodes in the morning before we start our, work day, and we always leave the conversation feeling empowered and feeling inspired. And I think several times for me, and I'm sure it's true for Amma, that when we're going through something low, I've in my mind, referred to someone else's journey and kind of taken notes on that. And, one of the things I think early on, we had interviewed Namita Jagtiani, who is a life coach. And even before that, when we talked about spirituality and the pandemic, right? The one practice I think that we keep coming back to is the practice of gratitude. And the practice of gratitude, which can just be like, oh, I'm grateful for my parents, my family, my kids, etc., to drilling it down to be very granular. And that comes with awareness, that comes with, being mindful, wherein you're actually grateful for every little thing, and I think with age and experience and life, what happens is that you realize everything happens for a reason, as cliche as it sounds, is that there are better opportunities if something does not work out. And to have that shift in perspective, to see things differently, I think that's what's really, that's a form of self-care in itself. And that also lightens your burden mentally, because you equipped to handle everyday situations, the ups and downs of life, the ebbs and flow in so much of a better way. And doing all of that along with, I think, yoga and meditation has been the cornerstones of, and all of this, mind you, has only started in the last 5 years. So it's never too late for anybody to start. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons, even personally for me. And that's what I tell anyone. And I think all of these practices, the number one thing it teaches you, especially in the fast paced life that we all lead, is to slow down.
Okay, so I think podcast was a medium of self-care for us, because we cannot, walk the walk and talk the talk if we're not really, changing our patterns and behavior that we're addressing in the podcast. And Shweta and I always say at the end of the podcast, after recording, we're like, even if this changed one person's opinion, even if this changed one person's behavior, even if this influenced one person's life, we're happy.
What you just said does really come across in your episodes. It's not really about standing and teaching or preaching, but really about listening and learning, and just creating that space for others to join you as you do it. I think that one of the biggest challenges is the cultural stigma that comes with admitting, right? That listen, that I may have a problem, and maybe it's a mental health issue. And so, how did you find the courage? What would you say to them that would encourage them to seek the help that they need?
I think mental health is a journey. You really have to sit and be comfortable with the struggles you're going through. That's when the self-awareness increases and you admit, oh yes, there is this issue I'm struggling with. Otherwise, you can go to a therapist, but if you're not willing to change, then change doesn't happen. So I think it's a process. So I recommend, and I'm going through this as well, Shweta, is just learn to sit with yourself a few minutes every day. Thoughts come around, learn to journal those thoughts, learn to question those thoughts. And that's where transformation starts beginning. Then once you've come to a stage where like, oh, I'm actually having these issues, then try to talk with other people around. Forming a community greatly helps.
When we talk about normalizing mental health, right? One is, when we talk about it out loud, but then with the conditioning that, in our South Asian culture we grew up with, it's also silencing those voices in your head that are telling you that, oh, you're fine, you're okay, you're strong, you got this, like how our, friends and family would say, right? What's wrong with you? You have everything, everything's in order, like what's wrong, right? So I think it's layered. You also have to, slow down that voice in your head trying to tell you that, it's fine, it's okay, you got this. And I think it takes courage to even admit. And I think the number one thing you can do is to be accepting of someone else's experience and be accepting of your own, you coming out. And I think another big struggle is that if you come out and share with someone, your closest confidant or your friend or your family member, that you're going through something, it's a sign of strength and not a sign of weakness. And I think this, more than the society or anyone outside, to understand, you have to understand that. And I think once you understand that and you accept that, you become comfortable with it. And once you're comfortable with it, when you speak it, when you share it with someone, you don't feel judged.
Yeah.
So as much as it is a community, it also starts within yourself, because there's so much work that we need to do within ourselves when you project it, when you project those issues coming out from a place of like, I know, I'm aware, it's okay. And I think people also become more accepting of it.
Yeah. Reading has really helped me. Reading on this topic, reading people's experiences, reading people's stories, that makes it, you judge other people's situation less, and that also opens eyes into what's going on within yourself. I clearly remember, which kind of sparked this whole conversation, I think, with Shweta, was this book. It's called What My Bones Know. It's by Stephanie Fu. I recommend everyone to read that. I mean, especially somebody who's grown up in a South Asian culture where there are certain taboos, stigmas, and stuff. And hers was probably an extreme trauma. But as I was reading that book, as I actually was listening to that book in Audible, a lot of similarities were there, and how she went through her mental health journey and how she transformed. And I drew lessons from that. So reading can be extremely helpful. Reading with curiosity, approaching life with curiosity versus like approaching life with a good or wrong, right or wrong, good and bad, but approaching with curiosity, which is why I think sitting with yourself very curiously is probably the first big step.
Are there any resources, support systems that you all can recommend to the South Asian community?
She runs a social media account. It's called Brown Girl Therapy. So she actually came out with her book, which is What Will People Say? It's by Sahej Kohli. I've been following her, and she shares really, and I think the whole book is very interesting. She's a therapist herself, and she's built a community of other South Asian therapists, a database of other South Asian therapists. But apart from that, everything in her book, which is really interesting to learn about, is it's about her own experiences and the community she has built online, listening to what they have to say and their experiences. Because I think we were speaking throughout our conversation here, we can draw so much of inspiration, similarities, feel seen, feel heard when we listen to other people's experiences and realize that we're not alone. And this is not our story or our journey alone. I would highly recommend checking out South Asian, Brown Girl Therapy.
Okay, so before we go, ladies, is there anything you want to say to other women who are sort of struggling to find their voice and find their authentic selves?
The first thing I would say is that, just feel that it's a woman is a community. Feel your community. Try to empower not just you, try to empower every other woman you come across. It could be a small step as actually just looking into the eye of another woman and saying, how are you? And really asking about how they're going through that day. It could be about offering a small help, sending a small smile. Just showing some way that we're all in this together. So empathy is probably the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to women empowerment, because one person's struggle is not different from another person's. There's always this kind of this undercurrent of struggle that everybody has in common. So have that empathy towards women. Raise your son to be a feminist. That doesn't mean, some people come to me and say, oh, what is my son, then he's going to just let everything go and the woman's just going to run the show for him. No, that's so wrong. No, the most attractive quality I believe, and I'm pretty sure most women will resonate to this, the most attractive quality I believe in men is how they treat with respect their women. Yeah. And so raise your son to be that. Women empowerment is not a job just left for women. Actually, a huge chunk of this job has to be done by men. And raise women to really learn and respect men and choose men that can empower them. And this is through love and respect.
I think the only thing I would like to add is, we always say this on the Tribe Break podcast, your vibe, your tribe. And that is all about building community with like-minded women where it's a space, a non-judgmental space where you can be yourself and express yourself. Like Rama said, start small and be part of those communities. Make that effort to reach out to other women, because there is space for us all. There is no one person that can dominate the space, and we can all exist and coexist, and that's how it's meant to be. So yeah, just find your like-minded people, and just start from there, and I don't think there's anything that can stop us.
Wonderful. So we just want to thank both you, Shweta and Rema, for coming onto our show. And we have no doubt that your willingness to really challenge the narrative, question what we've heard, about what we should do, how we should behave, what we shouldn't do, and break that sort of mold is going to encourage others to do the same without really having to worry about what society is going to say. It's not going to be, it's not going to define how we live our lives. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and coming onto our show today.